So what I'd like to do next is really lay some foundation and some context for talking about economic development and thinking about bioscience. And I'm fortunate to have Supervisor Richard Forrester, our immediate past president, who's going to walk us through this. Richard.
All right, thank you very much, Graham. This morning we have our first session on the regional economy and economic development. And with us we have Ben Ayers, is a senior economist with a nationwide mutual insurance company, part of the nationwide portfolio that has served many of our counties well in financial planning and other offerings. Ben is responsible for Nationwide's macro consumer analytics and macroeconomics analysis functions, which means that he dives into what's really going on in the economy and what lies ahead. He authors a weekly economic review, outlook, and is a frequent presenter of Nationwide's economic forecasts. Prior to joining Nationwide, Ben served as an assistant vice president at City Hedge Fund Services North America. And do you also sing the tune too? Oh, yeah. Yes? Okay. Maybe we'll hear that later. All right, next up on our panel, Doug Barton is a senior manager, chief executive officer, Los Angeles County, and joined the chief executive office in February 2016. And is responsible for managing economic development, affordable housing, and unincorporated area services for the County of Los Angeles. His priorities include promoting economic development opportunities, fostering job creation, and advancing housing production in both the incorporated areas and Los Angeles County as a whole. Prior to working with the CEO, Mr. Barron was a division chief with the treasurer and tax collector managing the county's public finance, deferred income, and the investment operations. Mr. Barron possesses a bachelor's degree from Princeton University and a master of business administration from Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Lastly on our panel, Duane Gathers is president and CEO of Gathers Strategies, providing strategic government affairs, economic development, and business development services as a range of clients in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. Duane also serves as the representative for LA County Board Chairman Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas on the executive committee of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. He has been actively engaged on a number of boards and commissions to promote economic development and civic engagement, including the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Los Angeles, the Business Tax Advisory Committee for the City of LA, the city's Workforce Investment Board, the city's Small Business Advisory Committee, and on the Mayor's Global Export Council. So I think you can all understand that we have three gentlemen here that are well versed in economics and hopefully will show us the light today. So I'm going to start with you, Ben, and let you make a few opening comments if you'd like.
All right, good morning. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for having me out here today. Coming from Ohio, it's always nice to come out to sunny Southern California, especially this time of year. Today we're going to be talking about housing. Why housing? Obviously, affordable housing is a very big issue across all the counties of the country, and really the housing sector in general is a very good bellwether for how the economy is doing in the local market and across the national economy. I'm going to start at the national level, start big picture, show some trends on the housing sector across the country, and then kind of zone in a little bit here on California and talk about some of the key trends that are impacting housing here locally. First slide I'll show will be job growth. So I'll show here a little bit. Job growth still looks very good. We've had some variability and some volatility here in the past couple months, mainly because of the hurricanes down south. Really disrupted the job growth here. Once that thing goes away, we can kind of see the big drop here in the past couple months. But still as a whole, job growth across the country looks very good. Why are we worried about job growth? It's really the key trends that we're looking at for both consumers, for businesses, and driving demand for housing. As jobs go, so does housing, so goes the economy, so goes everything. So job growth, really the most important indicator we look at on a monthly basis, and really the main driver of what's going on across the economy, across the country. As you can see, still looks very strong. There is a definite downtrend. We've averaged about 170,000 jobs across the country this year per month. It's a little bit down from last year where we had 180,000, so kind of a continuation of a general downtrend that we've had since 2014, but we're not concerned about that. As Supervisor Ridley Thomas mentioned, we are 9 years into this expansion, so very late in this expansion, and this is typically what happens at the later stage of the expansion. You start to see job growth slow down, not because companies aren't wanting to hire, they're simply running out of folks to hire. Most people have jobs. The unemployment rate at the national level is 4.1%, which is very low. That's actually lower than we got the entire previous expansion. So very good things looking across the board on the labor market. The only thing we're only a little bit concerned about is underemployment. Underemployment's still a little bit higher than it traditionally is. Certainly, some folks that would like to work full-time are getting those part-time jobs, so don't quite have the income growth to support spending and the housing we'd like to see. But still, across the board, very positive trends in the labor market, and that means very good things for the economy and very good things for the housing sector overall. So first thing, I'll show the good news in housing. Very strong demand, kind of leading from that job growth that we just had. Here I'm showing total home sales, and right now we're right about the 6 million level for total home sales. Most of those are existing sales, but that adds in the new home sales as well. As you can see, this is right about where we were at the early 2000s. You can clearly see the housing bubble from 2003 through 2006, way above average, way above where we probably should have been from a housing perspective, people buying 2, 3, 4 homes. And then we had the big crash, and now we're kind of coming back up very gradually. We would say this is a very sustainable level, and we're seeing very good things in housing demand across the board, mainly from the millennial generation. The older cohorts, the millennial generation, are entering the stages where they're getting married, having kids, and they're moving from rentals to single-family housing. Suddenly we have kids, and you don't really want to be close to downtown where the bars are. You want to be out where the good schools are and where everything looks great out in the suburbs. So we're seeing a big shift from rental to single family really just over the past 5 years, and that's supporting a lot of positive demand for housing sector, particularly in the lower end of the cheaper end of the housing sector. Generally, we feel this is a very sustainable level. We do think things will trend a little bit up from here. Even as mortgage rates move higher, we still feel that even as mortgage rates move higher, that the strong trends in income growth and the strong trends in job growth will sustain very positive activity across the housing sector. One thing I will note is the little dip there that we've had this year, and I think some people have taken some concern about that, and I think the main reason is the bad news in the housing sector. There's not many homes out there. Here I'm showing the total number of existing homes on the market. We have less than 2 million homes on the market right now. That's very low, and as you can see, really the lowest level we have going back to 2000. There's simply just not enough supply out there. There's lots of demand, lots of people want to buy homes. There just aren't that many homes out there, and the ones that are out there might be too expensive. So we're starting to get into that where we're really concerned about an affordable housing type situation, mainly because lots of demand, very little supply, that automatically raises prices very rapidly. We've seen house price growth well above average for several years. And when you look at the local regional levels, you can sometimes get way above average. I'm thinking of like Seattle right now. The house price growth is about 13% in Seattle. The long-term trend there is more about 4%, so you're 3 times the long-term average for house price growth in some areas. Here in California, we'll get to that in a minute, but certainly above trend growth as well, and kind of befitting the trends that we see here nationally, where lots of demand, a lot of people moving to California, lots of people moving out west, just not a lot of housing supply. This is just the existing side. I would say the new home side, we need more building. We're not seeing nearly enough building to match the household growth and the positive trends we're seeing in demand, so we'd like to see more building, but it just hasn't happened so far. And even some of the building we are seeing in new homes, the homes are just too big. The home builders are making homes too big. They aren't meeting the demands for the first-time home buyers, and especially that younger millennial generation as they shift from renters to single-family home owners. So kind of show the bad, show the good, show the bad. This one's kind of the meh category. Here what I'm showing is kind of a factor of housing affordability. Here I've indexed the CoreLogic House Price Index and disposable income per capita right about 1990, which we felt was a very on par level. Yet again, you can very clearly see the housing bubble. House prices went well above income growth. In the long run, economists would say that income growth and house price growth should go up together. That just makes sense. It keeps affordability in line, keeps housing affordable for folks, and right in line with incomes. And you can see in the early 2000s there, we went well above. And then we had a big crash, and now we've slowly been making our way back up. And the rapid gains that we've seen, particularly over the past 3 or 4 years, have brought us up to a relatively par level. So we would say there's no sign of a national housing bubble. Now, yet again, housing's always local, and I'll show a slide or two on that at the end to show the impact of what pricing affordability might be locally. But at the national level, we don't see any signs of a housing bubble. But the trend is clearly going to move above that orange line here very soon. And as you start to see, if we see several more years of well above trend house price appreciation across the country, we could start to get to the point where we're getting concerned even at a national level about affordability. So it's kind of a wait and see approach right now. I think right now we say that no housing bubble and things are right about par, but certainly the trend is moving away from affordable housing and towards an expensive housing sector. Fortunately, it's not just home incomes. Here I'm showing the Composite House Affordability Index brought to you by the National Association of Realtors. And as you can see, it's still relatively high. And partially that's because mortgage rates are still very low. It's not just the income growth and the job growth that looks very good and supportive of housing growth. It's mortgage rates. You can still get a 30-year conventional mortgage for right about 4%. So still very affordable from a financing standpoint. We do expect interest rates to move higher from here. It's kind of hard to go lower, so we still think the trend's going to be higher, probably not very rapidly, but we should see interest rates across the curve, and including mortgage rates go up from here. That will reduce affordability a little bit, but some of the estimates I've seen, it says even if we get another 200 basis points or 2%, you'd still see affordability about right here, so kind of in line with where we were in the 90s. So still, even though some of the price trends don't look very good across the board, most folks can afford homes because they have jobs. Most folks can afford homes because they have income growth, and the low mortgage rates are helping boost that as well. So what's this mean at a regional level? I showed the national level. We feel very good about that. Still seeing very positive trends. What about the regional level? A lot going on here. This shows, so we have our own indicator at Nationwide, what we call the Nationwide's Leading Index of Healthy Housing Markets. And really what we do is we combine a lot of economic factors and data that we get from local markets and try to see markets that have sustainable trends that will continue for the next couple years and should see positive growth in housing and positive growth in availability of housing. Generally across the board you can see most local areas are green. When we see a positive ranking, we're saying that you should very high likelihood of continued gains in sales, continued gains in price growth over the next couple years. As you get to more of a tan to a red, those are the markets we're a little more concerned about. There's a little bit of a higher likelihood of a housing downturn in those markets, either because things are not looking so good from a demand side, as is in the case in some of the oil markets that are red or tan here, or increasingly in the West, we're seeing markets that are overheating, particularly focusing yet again on the Denver area, a little bit of Dallas, Seattle, a little Salt Lake City is kind of a new one that's going to get a little overheating there. Those are the areas we're a little concerned just because we don't see these price gains and the trends going in a very sustainable direction just because things are overheating a little bit. Let me focus in on California here. Here I'm just pulling out all of the scores for the different metropolitan statistical areas in California and showing where that is over time. You can see across the board in California, positive rating. Things look very good. Demand side looks very good. Things look very positive and upward moving for the housing sector in really all of the MSAs within California. Two things I will note, very big stark difference from where we were in 2004 to 2006. The bubble was very pronounced here in California, and yet again not seeing nearly as much of the bubble indicators that we saw back then that we do now. But the other thing I will note is if you look here in 2012 through 2014, you got a darker shade of green. You have a lot more darker shade of green. And now it's that the first level of positivity here. So very minimally positive from our rankings here. What's caused that? First thing, job growth has slowed. Just as at the national level, you've seen job growth slow here locally. And then secondly, it's that affordability on housing, and I'll show some slides on that. But still, we are seeing some concerning trends here in California as far as an affordability standpoint for everyday folks. Next up, start with the job growth. So job growth at the national level, so job growth here in California. Here I'm showing job growth, year-over-year job growth. The blue line is your national. The orange there, I pulled out Southern California, and the green, I pulled out Northern California. So obviously, really throughout this expansion, California's done very well. Much faster than the national rate. A little bit faster in Northern California than Southern California, but still very positive growth across the board in jobs in California. But we've seen a slowdown recently. And typically what you see in California is much more variable than the national rate. It's a little more up and down. You see back in the recession, you guys went down a little further, but you come up a little faster as well. So we've seen a definite slowdown in hiring. That has impacted our demand metrics for the housing sector. That's been across the board, across the state here in both Southern and Northern California. Right now, you're right about the national average. So still looking okay, but certainly there are other areas of the country that are above the national average. So relatively speaking, a little bit less positive here than where you've been probably throughout the rest of this expansion. Now, where is that? Which sectors are those in as far as the job growth here in California? Here I'm breaking down, so I said the total private sector employment growth has been 1.6% over the past year. What sectors are seeing the big growth? And primarily it looks like it's in construction, trying to meet all of that housing demand, trying to build as much as we can to meet that housing demand. Information, IT, yet again, not a surprise for California. And then education and healthcare. That's a big gainer for growth and jobs across the country, yet again, not a very big surprise. So things look very good in those sectors. Some of the sectors that don't look as good, manufacturing, professional services, and retail trade. That's the retailers getting hit very heavily in the job front across the country as well. I will point out that the sectors here are by relative importance. So unfortunately, the construction information are not nearly as important from a job perspective as retail trade and professional services. So some of those sectors that are doing very well are some of the lesser sectors as far as total employment in the state. The ones that are not doing quite as well, unfortunately, towards the top. So kind of a mixed bag here. But certainly if you're a county or an area that has big focus on IT, on construction, and on these sectors, those are definitely the areas that are booming and the ones that are leading job growth across the state. One final slide, I promised some talk on affordable housing. So think back to that chart where I showed income growth versus house price growth. This is the same thing, but just done at the regional level and down to the MSA level. Yet again, the greener you are, the better it looks, and the more affordable the housing is relative to incomes. Now, looking here at California, obviously California is always expensive. It's always more expensive than the rest of the country. What we've done here is we've taken out we've been able to compare them across MSAs. We're looking at just the own history of a local area. So we're comparing the relative affordability within a market relative to its own history. And so what this tells us is that even in California, where things are always more expensive, they're more expensive than they usually are at this point. So some concerning trends, particularly in the western half of the country, we're seeing that the affordability does not look very good from a relative affordability perspective, comparing price growth versus income growth. I think it's two trends I really want to point out here. It's obviously in the bigger markets. You can see LA, San Diego, you can see the Bay Area, and then kind of extending that, I've mentioned several times, Denver and Seattle and Portland, some of the areas we're a little bit concerned about from affordability standpoint. And the second thing that isn't shown on here, but is some of the deeper research that we've done in this, is looking at price tiers and determining what are the concerning trends in affordability by price tier. And I think, not surprisingly, the cheaper the home, the worse the affordability is, because there's so much demand on that end. We've seen very rapid price gains below the median sales price for a market in the local area. If you go above that, you're seeing gains, but not nearly as strong as they are on the lower end. All those younger people that want to get their first-time home, much stronger affordability concerns on the lower end of the market. So one of the key things we're looking at is trying to dissect that apart. So thank you for your time, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
All right, we'll go back to our first panel now and go to Doug Barron, Senior Manager, Chief Executive Officer of Los Angeles County.
Thank you and good morning. As mentioned, my name is Doug Barron, and I manage both economic development and affordable housing for the County of Los Angeles. And in order to frame the discussion that I'd like to have today, I'd like to first mention that economic development is actually a relatively new endeavor for the County of Los Angeles. If you go back prior to 2016, the county did not have an economic development department, it did not have an economic development unit, it did not have an economic development division. We managed economic development primarily through our Community Development Commission, which was funded, at least on the economic development side, partially or largely by tax increment under the former redevelopment statute. But even that is a bit of an oxymoron, because there really was not a lot of funding that the county transferred through to economic development at the Community Development Commission. Over the entire course of redevelopment, the county established only 5 project areas. And at the time of dissolution, we were actually the only redevelopment agency in the state that did not have a single enforceable obligation. The county's redevelopment agency never issued any debt, never entered into a development agreement, and relied on modest pay-go funding to pursue economic development in the county's unincorporated areas. But yet that is not to say that when redevelopment was dissolved in early 2012 that there wasn't an impact to the County of Los Angeles. There was a significant impact to all of the 88 cities in the county. Many cities invested heavily in economic development, largely through their redevelopment agencies. When dissolution occurred in 2012, their greatest funding source to spur economic activity went away. And ultimately, the county took notice of this change. The county realized that it was in its best interest as home to more than 10 million residents to do what it can and to look again at economic development in a post-redevelopment world. So the County of Los Angeles really began its endeavor into economic development beginning in 2015. Following a motion in October of that year from Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, the county established an economic development budget unit. This was housed within the Chief Executive Office. It was only a modest amount of funding. It went to support 5 different programs. It was primarily focused on business assistance in the form of loan programs, blight removal, and industry sector strategies, looking to grow clusters and industries within the region. Shortly thereafter, the county took additional steps to sort of form its economic development infrastructure. Beginning in June 2016, we formed an Economic Development Policy Committee. I'm happy to report that all 5 board offices not only are represented on this committee, but participate through their deputies on a twice-monthly basis. We also have 4 permanent members of the committee, 4 different departments in the county: our Chief Executive Office, our Office of Consumer and Business Affairs, our Workforce Development Department, and then our Community Development Commission. Importantly, we also have an advisory body. The advisory body meets each quarter and includes 2 representatives appointed by each supervisorial district. These quarterly meetings are also well attended by not just a majority, but often the entire advisory body. We want to create a holistic approach to economic development, and we want it to be integrated across county departments and integrated with the stakeholders and communities that we interact with. Additional actions taken to secure and create our infrastructure occurred in February of 2017. That's when we released what we call our Economic Development Scorecard. This was really an inventory of everything the county does in terms of economic development. It's about 40 pages long and includes statistics and metrics and listings of each economic development program, whether it's workforce development, business assistance, loan programs, financial empowerment, or capital programs. We've since released our second Economic Development Scorecard in May of 2017 and have another that's due out later this month. We also have launched 2 websites. In July of 2017, we launched our countywide economic development website hosted by the Chief Executive Office. This essentially provides a more public-facing means to interact with what the county is doing on economic development. It provides resources to job seekers, to businesses looking to move into Los Angeles County or expand within Los Angeles County. It also is a means to showcase the various efforts that we've undertaken in economic development to stakeholders, communities, and cities that surround the county. And then finally, we have a very robust, very powerful GIS site selector tool, which I'll talk about more later in the presentation. Initially, this rolled out for just the county's unincorporated areas, which represent approximately 1 million of the 10 million residents who reside or live in Los Angeles County. It's now been rolled out to encompass all 88 cities, all 10 million residents, and the entire geography of LA County. So when we designed our economic development program, how did we do so, and what was our model? Well, the mission of the policy committee is really not that different from what you'd see in any economic development program across the country. We look to deliver economic successes to all residents in the county and provide an integrated approach across county departments. We have specific goals, which include measurable gains in job creation, increased private investment, expansion of the tax base, and enhanced opportunities for targeted or disadvantaged populations. Again, these goals are like goals that you'll see in redevelopment or economic development programs across the state of California. One thing I will mention, however, is that what we are contributing is a relatively modest amount of funding. What we're doing is we're taking existing county programs and leveraging them to provide greater and enhanced results. And this occurs through, staples of county government, such as the zoning and permitting process, or the workforce development programs that are federally funded through WIOA. We're looking to coordinate these with other departments that have similar programs and provide greater opportunities for workers and greater connections with businesses. We're also looking to leverage our vast portfolio of county assets. We're looking for public-private partnerships, opportunities for transit-oriented development, mixed-use development. We don't want assets to sit idle. We don't want to be in the land banking business. We want to put our property and our investments into play, create jobs, as well as support the county's infrastructure. And then finally, I want to add that we do not rely on tax incentives, nor do we rely on tax increment to support our county economic development efforts. As anyone who might have been involved with the Amazon RFP recently would know, California does not have a large swath of economic development or tax incentives that it can put on the table. We don't have $7 billion like the state of New Jersey in tax incentives to entice a large company to move to the state of California or the Los Angeles region. And just to give a little example, Prop 13 restricts what you can do with property tax. Sales tax is not discretionary or rarely so at the county level. And then transient occupancy tax, that benefits cities as much as it does, or more so than counties, who only receive those revenues for the unincorporated areas. Yet nonetheless, California is rich in natural resources, a strong economy, and has other desirables that naturally attract businesses, both large and small. So we are not looking to put a large component of the county general fund into economic development. We want to leverage our resources, leverage our programs, and build a strong program that's coordinated and integrated around all of our efforts. So one of the first components of economic development for the County of Los Angeles is what we're doing in the area of business assistance. And first I'll mention our countywide contracting program. And this is really a program that takes advantage of the county's large procurement effort and contracting process. The county expends over $4 billion annually on its service and work-related contracts. What we've done is we've created incentives for small businesses, for veteran businesses, and for social enterprises, those companies committed to the public good. And what we've done is given point preferences on county procurements, such that these businesses, which are often local, have a greater opportunity to get a piece of the pie. The county can leverage its procurement muscle, if you will, its contracting muscle, to influence the local economy, to support local jobs, to bring jobs to veteran businesses, and to support social enterprises. We also have a small business concierge. The small business concierge is designed really to assist new businesses that want to move into Los Angeles County and set up a storefront, set up a retail establishment, an office, a commercial space. And again, this is an office that exists within our Consumer and Business Affairs department and can have a significant sort of exponential impact relative to the amount of funding that's required. What we're trying to do is eliminate the red tape and make it easier to build, grow, and start a business in Los Angeles County. In addition, and this may be where we've put the most general fund dollars, we have 3 new loan programs that we've established. And they really have different objectives. One is a manufacturing revolving loan fund, which I would say is sort of a traditional economic development financing tool. It looks to support what has been a declining segment of the Los Angeles County, and a segment which also offers a lot of entry-level jobs and good career paths for those who are not currently in the labor market. We've also established or are building a catalytic loan fund, and what this is designed to do is leverage county development, whether it's mixed use, public, private, or just public, and support businesses that can benefit from this new investment, businesses that are located in and around the county's investment in its capital program. And then thirdly, we're developing a bioscience loan fund. This is also sort of a creative attempt to grow and foster an important sector of the county's regional economy. The model for bioscience has typically been a venture capital fund. Therefore, we're looking at that, we're accepting that reality, and we're not doing a traditional revolving fund which requires capital. What we're doing is we're lending to equity investors who can then support startup companies and incubators within the Los Angeles region and provide a patient source of capital to those with the expertise to make the requisite investments. Also, as I mentioned earlier, permitting assistance. If you talk to small businesses, the number one frustration typically is not the cost to start a new business, but it's the red tape. When they talk about local government, the frustration is, where do I go for this permit? Why do I have to go to fire when I just started at Public Works? And then what's the role of regional planning? You didn't tell me I needed a permit from Public Health. And then there's a parks permit as well. There are 5 different departments in the county that often and can have a role in the permitting process. We're working both electronically and through physical assets to try and create a more streamlined, one-stop approach that can help support business development in the county. We also, and finally, have a layoff aversion service, and this is funded by our federal WIOA dollars. It's housed in our Workforce Development Department. And what it is a service that specifically supports struggling businesses. It provides technical assistance, can provide guidance regarding accessing local capital, can help negotiate, I don't want to say forgiveness programs, but negotiate with utilities or other creditors as far as working through a difficult financial patch. Again, that's operated in the same department that has our workforce development programs, and the logic is, who are those most affected by a business closing? It's the workers. It's not just the owners and the investors, but it's the workers who are out of a job and need to find new employment. The next component, and I've alluded to this earlier as well, of the county's economic development program is workforce development. And I think the program that most individuals or most county and local governments are most familiar with is the federal WIOA program. And that relates to the workforce investment boards, the America Job Centers, AJCCs, America Job Centers of California, and is funded by federal dollars. The county gets $30 to $40 million annually to fund its WIOA program, but we think it possibly can be run more efficiently. Oftentimes programs that receive federal or state funding are not looked at as closely as they could be. Why? Because it's not net county cost. It's not coming out of the county general fund, so maybe it doesn't receive the same scrutiny. But if you look up and down the state at WIOA programs and you look at the results, you'll see remarkable consistency. They all achieve just above their federal benchmark. I don't think statistically that is very probable. So I think they bear closer scrutiny. We want to develop not just entry-level jobs, but career paths. And further, we want to also coordinate our WIOA program with other workforce development initiatives that exist within the county. And as we produced our first scorecard and started to inventory everything the county is doing in workforce development, we realized that in addition to WIOA, the county has 24 other workforce development and job training and job placement programs that support specific targeted populations. These can be veterans, these can be foster care youth, these can be probationers, these can be the homeless. These programs are often department specific. Many rely on grant funding, some on net county cost, but there's very little communication, very little leveraging that's done with existing resources, whether it's through WIOA and America's Job Centers, or whether it is perhaps a more established program targeting a specific population. And then thirdly, as Supervisor Ridley Thomas mentioned in his earlier remarks, we're expanding our local and targeted workforce, or local and targeted worker hire program. This is specific to county construction jobs, where we have a 30% local hire goal and a 10% targeted worker goal. These targeted workers are the same ones that are a priority of our workforce development programs. We should be using our workforce development programs, our job centers, our departments that are serving these populations as a possible feeding ground for jobs on our construction projects. These disadvantaged workers are a priority of the county, and they're a priority for several reasons. It's not simply humanitarian, although that is sort of the primary motivation, but there's also a desire to foster independence, to bring and take individuals out of the safety net and give them self-sustaining employment. So we're looking again to bring these programs together and integrate what we already have, not necessarily investing new dollars, but better spending the resources we've already allocated. And then I also want to mention a financial empowerment program that we have. This is also managed through our Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, and I think some of these efforts are relatively unique to the County of Los Angeles. We have a Cash for Grads program, and this program is dedicated specifically to graduating high school seniors who have a parent who's currently has an open case in the CalWORKS system. And what this program does is it teaches students how to save and manage money, use credit cards responsibly, rent an apartment, and more. And the logic being that if individuals understand how to better manage their money, they will be better savers, better spenders, more responsible contributors to the local economy. Also under the umbrella of financial empowerment, we have a tax assistance program, a volunteer free income tax assistance program that's really designed to get low income and low to middle income tax filers aware of the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. Many filers do not know that they are eligible for what are very sizable tax credits. When you assist an individual who may not be aware of this opportunity, this savings, you can put an extra $2,000 into their pocket and into the economy. So we believe there is a nexus here with what we're doing on economic development, and we've brought financial empowerment under the umbrella of what we're doing in the CEO's office. Then finally, capital programs. I don't think you can have an economic development program which does not look at the development component of that moniker and which emphasizes capital production. We're currently leveraging the county's vast, and I mean vast, we own over 4,000 properties, portfolio of assets to foster commercial development, hotels, a biotech park, as you saw earlier, office space, and smaller retail establishments. We currently have 9 what I would call public-private projects underway, and we have more in the works. We're looking at this as a means to leverage what we already have, not expend additional county general fund dollars, but support the local economy and foster job growth. We have projects that support transit-oriented development. In the 2nd District, there's 2 projects currently underway that are directly aligned with what our metro is doing in terms of its expansion. One is at the Expo Crenshaw site, the other at the Fairview Heights site. The Los Angeles County Metro recently had approved a sales tax measure, Measure M, which is going to allow for a significant expansion to the extent that the county owns assets that can benefit from this expansion, where the real estate now is, I would say, more desirable, more attractive. Well, we can leverage that. We can leverage it both for county infrastructure as well as for the private component where the county can generate rents to help fund what it's doing to support its own facilities. In addition, public-private partnerships. The county wants to be creative. The county wants to look at new ways to foster project delivery. In what we call our Vermont Corridor project, we have what is truly a public-private partnership, including the design, build, the financing, the operations, and maintenance. And what we've done is we're building 3 different core facilities. One will house a new headquarters for our Department of Mental Health. We also have an affordable senior living facility. There's a community center, and then there is also a market rate component. This is a new sort of endeavor for the county where we did a procurement looking at really turnkey development to increase the efficiency and cost savings as well as allow for private development on county-owned land. And finally, I'll mention affordable housing. This is where the county really has put its dollars into play. The county established an affordable housing budget unit in late 2015, with the goal of bringing this funding up to $100 million annually beginning in 2021-22. We currently have $40 million in funding, and we're growing that at $20 million increments until we hit $100 million annually. With the fall of redevelopment, it wasn't just economic development that suffered. In fact, I would argue it was primarily affordable housing that suffered. The local, the low and moderate income housing allocation of 20% from tax increment represented a significant loss to the affordable housing market. We're looking to restore some of those dollars with our own general fund, leverage what we already do at our Community Development Commission, and look at new strategies for housing preservation, looking at naturally occurring affordability, and looking at an acquisition fund where the county's assets are not sufficient. What is out there in the market? Many people don't realize, but in the county of Los Angeles alone, there are still 1,700 assets that were owned by the former redevelopment agencies that have not yet been sold. Many of those are opportunities. I won't say the majority, but it's not insignificant. We did a close, or I would say sort of a scan of these assets and identified close to 100 that have potential for affordable housing development. We narrowed that list to 18, and now we're starting to diligence what opportunities might exist there. So what are future opportunities for economic development? I think the county wants to continue, in fact, I'm certain the county wants to continue to promote an integrated approach. And I say integrated because we're looking at the worker, we're looking at the employer, and we're looking at where the employer and the worker live. How do they afford to own a house and raise a family in Los Angeles County? We also want to focus on career pathways. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's not about just meeting some targeted job placement goal. It's looking at what industries, what sectors can provide sustaining career paths, can provide a pathway to independence, reduce the reliance on the county's safety net, and again, promote a long-term stable life condition, if you will, in Los Angeles County, supported by both housing and job opportunities. We're also looking to continue streamlining our zoning and permitting process. I mentioned that earlier, but frankly, the county has a long way to go. There are cities in Los Angeles that really have excellent one-stop online portals that can take you with a great amount of efficiency to where you need to go to navigate the local bureaucracy or the local requirements in terms of permitting and zoning. We want to replicate what's been done well and bring that to Los Angeles County. We also want to align our programs with key industry sectors. As was shown earlier, one of the growth sectors in Los Angeles County is construction. And this is only going to continue to be so. And it's not just due to the economy or the need for affordable housing. It's due to a lot of ballot measures that have recently been passed. At the school district level, you have Measure M with the county metro. You have Measure H for homeless housing with the city of LA. You've got SB2 at the state level for affordable housing, and you have the new gas tax for infrastructure. Construction is going to continue to grow. How do we align our workforce development programs with that expected growth? There's also industries such as bioscience, the only industry that withstood the Great Recession and actually showed job growth throughout Los Angeles County during that downturn. We want to identify other industries such as that where we can guide our workers into career paths, where we can develop loan programs that support startups and support local businesses. And then finally, we want to continue to promote affordable housing and mixed-use development. And that is largely what I referenced earlier as far as putting the county general fund to work, being creative, not just relying on the old methods, and looking at the entire gamut of housing options, from workforce housing down to permanent supportive housing, special needs, and homeless housing. And I think to conclude, one place where we continue to promote and showcase and try to make our resources available to the public and other stakeholders is through our economic development website. You'll see on the top bar or menu, most of the topics that I talked about today are menu options on this site, whether it's business assistance, workforce development, financial empowerment, capital programs, or our GIS site selector tool. With respect to the site selector tool, some jurisdictions might be familiar with GIS planning or the Zoom prospector navigation tool. What we have done is we've taken that technology, contracted with GIS planning, and created a site selector tool that covers all of Los Angeles County. So if you're looking to make a new investment in a small business, let's say you're looking to locate in the city of industry, you can see on this site in real time every available site for lease or purchase, all office, commercial, industrial, or retail spaces available for purchase or lease. You can get the name of the real estate agent. You can get a brochure about that property. You also can set up a search, which would include a radius around where you look to invest. You can get the demographics of the local population. You can get median income. You can get education levels. You can get consumer spending. You can get information about local businesses that operate in proximity to where you're looking to locate. And this can tell you both about businesses that might complement what you're doing or might compete with what you're doing. So this is a very valuable tool for businesses, large and small, looking to locate in Los Angeles County, for site selectors that serve some of those business moves, as well as economic development professionals. Finally, the last slide is just the web addresses for where our website can be found, where the GIS tool is located, and then an email address where you can contact the Chief Executive Office to learn more about our economic development program. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Very impressive program. Now we'll have comments from Duane Gathers.
And I'm going to make those comments as opposed to a large PowerPoint presentation, because what I really wanted to do and my contribution to this conversation was not at the macro level, but really how at the micro level the county and a county supervisor can make an impact on economic development. As we know, Los Angeles County is the largest county in America. It's got 88 cities. We're a separate state to be the 7th largest state in the country. And having been here since 2004, one thing we know is that cities all do their own thing. They don't really collaborate very much, and certainly we've not seen as strong a city-county collaboration on important issues. So it was quite fascinating that under this supervisor, the words economic development were brought to the table at the county level. And suggested that that would be a county priority, because previously it was not, and most of my economic development work within the region was at the city level. But I have to say, what's been great, and it came out of a serendipitous conversation with Dave Riccatello, talking about the county's effort around life sciences, the county's efforts around housing, the county efforts around small business procurement. These are all nice and well and nice pieces, but what's the overall narrative, and how are we taking these pieces and tying them together to really impact economic development? So under the leadership of the supervisor, it gave us the task of creating, and this is the first time this was undertaken by any supervisor here in LA, the first ever economic forum focused on bringing forth not only the county, but all the cities within this particular sliver of Los Angeles. As you know, as we said, LA County is 88 cities. The 2nd District itself is one of the most diverse in this region, encompassing nearly 2 million people, 8 cities, and you've got, from, the digital media folks on the west side of LA, to USC on the east side, to Compton to the south, to Hawthorne, to Linwood. So it's the most exciting and interesting district with a lot of disparities as well. So I think, at the supervisor reference at the very beginning is not that we're putting these policies in place, but the question is how we are applying them so that they achieve goals of economic opportunity and equity across the board. So on September 22nd, we were able to, after months of hard work, pull together the first ever forum focused on furthering economic opportunity in LA County's 2nd District. And what was terrific about this is that, I've attended a lot of economic development conferences over the years, and one of the first things we decided to do was say, not use the word conference, but forum. And by that, we meant that people were not going to be talked at, but they were being brought to the table to be engaged in a conversation. Secondly, as opposed to a morning event where people run in, have their bagels, get out by noon to get to the office, we decided to have it on an afternoon because one of the key goals was to foster collaboration and to have people stay afterwards. So in terms of the focus, the intention, the planning of it, the bringing in of program partners, not just sponsors for the sake of sponsorship. We always love money, but the idea that, a City National Bank, as they look to grow, are looking to do more things in diverse communities. So, they came in as a program partner. As we look to foster city-county collaboration, we had the chairman of the Economic Development Council, Economic Development Committee for the LA City Council participate. Organizations like Trammell Crow, well known by many of you, of course, in terms of real estate development, has undertaken a couple of projects in Compton. They participated. USC, of course, one of our leading academic organizations, participated. Cal State Dominguez Hills. The state universities are incredibly important from workforce development. They participated. So from the intention of the timing, intention of the location, the program partners, and the fact that, the supervisor extended invitations, that was also important because, you've got people doing certain things in Compton, certain people doing things in Los Angeles, people doing things in Culver City. How do we tie them together? People need to know that they are not alone working on these issues, but how are we fostering that collaboration? So we had some big goals to convene, to address challenges, common challenges, to identify opportunities, to encourage greater intra-regional collaboration and knowledge sharing, and have people put forth specific recommendations. So it was really, really a focused endeavor. And out of that, we looked at very distinct elements of economic development and what were we seeing as challenges and opportunities, and how could we share information around access to capital. Obviously, Doug referenced some stuff that the county is doing. We have private sector partners talking about it from the standpoint of startup capital, fostering innovation, growth capital, capital for minority and women-owned businesses. So that was an important element of the conversation. Education, training, workforce development, community colleges, the state university system, and others, and workforce investment boards. How were they aligning their programs with the diverse job opportunities across these various sectors, such as life sciences, as referenced earlier, and will be referenced later on. Housing was a distinct piece because that is a key driver, but not necessarily just the affordable housing component, but really what we see as an extraordinary challenge here, and that is the housing associated with our first responders, nurses, teachers, et cetera, because certainly they're being squeezed. So that was sort of the subcomponent of housing that we addressed in this forum. And then looking at technology infrastructure, which was critically important. In certain communities on the west side of LA, high fiber content, Culver City, strong digital media content, but how do we include and increase our technology infrastructure so that it becomes a magnet for the types of jobs that we want to have in life sciences, in sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And out of that, we had these teams work on these issues focused on challenges, opportunities, and specific recommendations that could be worked on by the county in conjunction with the cities, in conjunction with private sector partners, with academic partners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say that, again, this was highly successful, even that it was the first one, because we got over 150 participants, and the surveys have been extraordinarily terrific, saying, hey, we're glad to be invited. We met, new people that we can now collaborate with. We appreciate the role of the county in bringing us all together, and we will move forward in that regard. But I think, again, where the county had not focused on economic development as a priority, it became a priority, and it shows the role that the county can play as a convener, as a facilitator of knowledge sharing, as an influencer, and to engage people in these conversations, and really to elevate. And I think some initial results of all of this work that's been undertaken is that, you know, the county's Economic Development Corporation each has, over the last decade now, done a competition focused on most business-friendly city, looking at cities that are making strides to attract and retain and grow businesses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know we'll find out tonight when the LA EDC has their annual dinner, but you know, 2 of the second district cities, Compton and Inglewood, are in the finalists for this year's award. So again, I think with regards to economic development, it shows that A, leadership matters, B, it shows that a supervisor with vision can bring people together and motivate people to work together to achieve opportunity for all folks. And as I said, you know, certainly in the second district, we've got some wide disparities, but the goal is to share that information so that, you know, the Comptons can grow along with the Linwoods, with the Hawthorns, and the Carsons, and the Culver Cities. And I just heard just yesterday that Culver City was selected as the new home for Amazon Studios, not HQ, but certainly Amazon Studios is relocating from Orange County to Culver City. So that's a nice win for the second district.
All right, I think we have time for a few questions before we go into a break. So, Dorothy.
If I have the microphone, so I'm going to take advantage of that. Question for Doug and perhaps Duane too, and tying into what Ben mentioned. So we know housing stock and supply is keyed in with economic development, economic growth. And I think there was a report recently saying that there's several hundred affordable housing units at risk in LA County for a variety of reasons. But I guess my question is, looking at the online housing platforms like Airbnb and other short-term rentals, is that having an impact at all on housing availability? I know you have a great report on your website about how much economic growth is being created from those platforms, but wondering if there's another side to that in relation to housing availability.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Is this mic?
Mm-hmm. It's maybe a little closer.
Okay. Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I know the Los Angeles City Council, there we go. I know the Los Angeles City Council recently took up the Airbnb issue and is looking at it very closely, especially in communities like Venice, where you just see an overwhelming number of Airbnb rentals squeezing out what would otherwise be available units for lower moderate income renters or moderate or even higher income renters. Either way, they're hurting the supply. Now, for the county within its jurisdiction, Airbnb would be applicable only to our unincorporated areas. And while that is a large portion of the county, the number of rental units is actually relatively small compared with the city of LA. We do believe Airbnb has a significant presence in communities such as Marina del Rey, and so it is on our radar, but it's not something we've looked at yet. But let me just make a quick comment regarding preservation and the number of at-risk affordable units. I mean, the number isn't in the hundreds, it's in the thousands. And this is due not only to expiring covenants, be they federal, state, or local, but also due to gentrification and displacement risk. For units that might have been rental units, they might be looking to convert to condominiums, or you might see those with expiring covenants in rising rental rate communities or gentrifying communities look to exit the affordability practices that they've had previously. The county is looking at what it can do regarding preserving those units. There was a motion just adopted by our board in September of this year asking us to look specifically at preservation options and potentially an acquisition fund that could help facilitate the acquisition of such properties, putting them in ownership hands of a nonprofit committed to affordable housing.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, what can the state do as far as policy initiatives to help with the affordable housing, help with the job creation? What else can the state do as far as on the policy front?
Well, I will just say that I know from my work, not my LA work, but I also serve on the board of the Hollywood Chamber. And of course, you know, I think about 7 years ago, there was a new Hollywood community plan. It got sued. Here we are 7 years later, and I know the chamber leadership, along with the LA area chamber, has been back and forth to Sacramento trying to get some sort of CEQA reform. It's an absolute travesty, and it has definitely impacted development and certainly the ability to do any sort of development. And we've had no success in Sacramento at this point. We're hopeful that, and we believe that Senator Ben Allen is now motivated and engaged and is willing to be helpful. But at this point, no one else has been terribly helpful on that point.
Yeah, and I would echo that comment to a degree. I mean, I think, you know, I think whether it's CEQA reform or some other means to expedite the delivery of affordable housing, that is the biggest challenge that remains. The state took massive steps this year to provide additional funding for affordable housing, looking at it in new and creative ways. But there are still issues at either the state or local level regarding how you expedite delivery of that housing, including how you address NIMBY issues and those who don't want to see affordable housing in their communities. What can you do better to engage those local residents and facilitate the development of affordable housing?
If I might, Mr. Forster, I think the county's role as a convener, especially on regional scale issues, is an important one, especially as you look at issues like the Airbnb VRBO, which is going to take a general approach in order to get our hands around it. I think it's in fact significant. But as you look at specific county resources, land, money, time, staff effort, put into economic development, have you been thinking about performance measures? Do we have a sense of what kind of payback we're getting in terms of county effort expended?
Yes, I mean, I think we're looking at, you know, 3 metrics perhaps. One is job creation, and I think you have to look at that sort of on a project or program specific basis. It would be a bit naive for the county to think that its modest investment in economic development is going to spur, you know, a percentage rate growth in the whole regional economy, which, as Duane alluded to, would probably be the 7th largest in the country if we were a state in and of ourselves. But we do want to look at job creation associated with specific efforts, whether it's our catalytic fund, whether it's our manufacturing loan fund, our workforce development efforts, or even financial empowerment, if that does something to facilitate long-term employment paths for individuals. So job creation or job placement is one metric. To some degree, we'll look at expansion of the tax base, and that would be related to specific capital endeavors. And then thirdly, we look for business growth. And again, I think we're not going to look, you know, in totality at all sectors and all industries. We're going to sort of pick our targets where they seem to fit with the county's overall priorities and policy objectives and try and support those specific industries. And then we'll look for job or private investment growth in those areas. But we're not there yet. We're very much still in the implementation phase. We're about 1.5 years into our program.
Ben, I'm going to start a question with you. The same question I asked Mr. Metcalf. When you look at the macroeconomic analysis, do you take into account factors like the twin tunnels and the problems they're having and how that could impact economic growth in the future because of the issues with water?
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, that has an impact on affordable housing and where you can build housing. If you can't get water there, no one's going to want to live there. So, you know, those kind of factors lay into, you know, what we're looking at a country level and down to regional levels as well. You just kind of keep an eye on making sure that the folks who have jobs in that area can buy the housing, but that they can live comfortably there. I mean, obviously, if you have to bring in water from farther away, that can cause more cost, and there's more cost for home ownership, and that raises, again, the relative cost of housing.
And gentlemen, on an economic development level, does that affect your strategies at all, or are you looking more in the short term and looking at that as more of a long-term issue?
I mean, I'll mention just from the county's perspective, there is sort of a parallel pathway that's been developed on water resiliency for the entire county. That's one of the top priorities of our Department of Public Works and the Flood Control District, looking at new ways to capture stormwater and to support or be more self-sustaining in terms of water efficiency, water delivery, and water use.
Any questions from the audience? Further questions? We still have just a couple minutes. We'll look at, on the question of housing affordability, when you're looking at workforce housing, but the overall availability and cost, is the trend being seen in other parts of the county and in the state?
You want to take that, Ben?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, well, I mean, there are pockets within Los Angeles County, as within any county, that are experiencing higher growth rates and higher relative increases in terms of home prices and rental rates. But I think it's fair to say that it's really a regional trend or even a statewide trend. We see it throughout the county. The issue of affordability does not permeate just one community or one locale. It's really the entire region.
Yeah, I would second that, and I would just reiterate what I said in my comments, that you're particularly seeing the affordability concerns on the lower end of the market. You know, the higher end of the market, you know, those folks have money, and the prices haven't gone up nearly as much. And you know, in most of the local areas here in California, you've seen the median sales price of a low or below median home double over the past 5 years. You know, going from 150,000 to 300,000 or something of that nature. So very strong trends, particularly on the lower end of the affordability range, and that's a concern particularly for first-time home buyers and just those who have never owned a home before.
Thank you. I think one more question. Doug, on your presentation, the tax credits that would go to businesses, that seems to be the model that other states are using to steal businesses from California. And I know you addressed that a little bit on why we can't do it, but if other states can do it, should our state be looking more into that process of developing a program?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging question. It is an issue at the state level because of the state income tax. They're the ones who control those levers. And I think, you know, from a philosophical standpoint, you don't want to enter into the territory of corporate welfare or just transfer payments to, you know, what are already well-funded organizations. But then you also have to look at it from a competitive or relative standpoint as far as what are your neighbors doing, what are other states doing across the country, recognizing that you have to look at the playing field, and having some sort of tax credit program, even if used on only sort of very specific and targeted occasions, is necessary to compete for some of those big investments.
All right, any further questions? With that, I think let's give our panel a great big hand. Thank you, gentlemen.